Okay. Hey everybody, welcome to Table 1's class. We're going to do class 5 bash. He's presenting on Proxmox for Dummies. We're also a nonprofit organization, and we would really appreciate donations because we might be losing where we're currently located.
We learned yesterday.
Yeah, we learned yesterday that we currently might be moving. Thank you very much.
Sweet. All right, thank you. I am super excited to teach you guys this class. We've been talking about, well, I've been talking to people about teaching a class on Proxmox for over a year now. So I'm really excited to actually do it and show you. So my class today is Proxmox for Dummies. None of you are dummies, but maybe that'll make you feel...
Speak for yourself.
Oh, you're fine. Maybe that'll make you feel comfortable wanting to learn, and I'll be shooting at that level. So level enough that you know computers, you know how to use them, but you've never used Proxmox before. So this is kind of your first time. Before I start, I want to ask everyone, do you have any questions or things that you want to learn about? I'm not going to answer them now, but I'll try and make sure I hit those questions during the class.
How to back up and restore a VM. Okay,
back up and restore VM. Really important.
Virtual networking and virtual LANs.
Virtual networking.
Or, virtual VLANs.
And virtual VLANs. Got it.
Running Docker.
Running Docker. Okay.
Disabling ARC.
Say that again. Okay, that was... All right, well, the nice part is on my list, I have every single one of those items. I knew you would want to do those questions because they're the same questions I had the first time. Let me pull out my list so I remember. So let's get started. First, who am I? My name is Mike Weaver. My Twitter handle and my handle is bashNinja. I am a DC 801 Labs member. Professionally, I work in incident response as an incident responder, doing computer security. When I was in college, I co-founded the UVU Cybersecurity Club. And I am a husband. I have 2 kids and 3.5 horses. Here you've got the look, and half because one of the horses is a mini Shetland pony. Okay. It's only 3 feet tall. And I am an avid home labber. So did I mention I'm an avid home labber? I love to do things at my house with computers and servers and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to talk about this little setup here is my travel setup. I brought it to the class today. And this is what we're going to be working on is this travel setup. This is a build that I did with Clipper at the Utah Home Lab Discord. He did it for a presentation for SaintCon earlier this year. This is actually a Chinese motherboard using the X99 Intel chipset, desoldered from an old Intel from another motherboard and soldered on there. This is a really fun build. This here looks like a crypto mining rig. It's not. It's a password cracking rig that also mines crypto because you don't crack passwords all the time. This is another lab setup. In this picture, you can't see it very well, but there are 4 servers in this one here. I'm not going to tell you what that one's for because it's a secret project, but I will tell you later. And in this bottom one on the right, this is my Plex server with almost 200 terabytes of raw storage. Yes, I see the look. It's not that much. It could be worse. with compute and a Brocade firewall. Now I do the majority of my stuff at 10 gig, just because it's gotten cheap enough that we can. And I love it. I love doing home labs, and so because of that love, I went to Proxmox. What is Proxmox? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. But I brought a little screenshot here, kind of what it looks like. It is a enterprise open source hypervisor. It's made for enterprises, and you can pay for subscription licenses if you want to. It's not required. It is also open source, so if you're concerned about the the pop-ups that pop up and say you don't have a subscription, you can just go edit the source and remove that out if you want to. Please don't. They ask you not to, but you can because it's open source. Really, the goal of what a Proxmox server is to be able to run a lot of different things inside of it, particularly to run virtual machines. So in here, you can see that you've got a virtual machine here called Web Server, and then they've started it up, and you can actually see the screen. They haven't booted it to anything yet, but it's in the boot process. This is their little BIOS screen. So you can do virtual machines. And the next super exciting thing that brought me to Proxmox over other options was Lxc Containers. And I'll go into pretty deep detail with that. And then you've got all the other fancy features that other hypervisors have, like using remote source storage, CIFS, Samba, NFS, iSCSI, all those different things. And there's a ton that Proxmox does that I'm not going to cover today.
And it does clustering.
Yes, it does clustering, and I have that on the list. If we get to it, we'll talk about clustering, but there's a lot on my list here. So before I move on, there are some other options for hypervisors that I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about the primary ones that I've seen in Home Labs stuff. I've seen ESXi. ESXi is great. They have a free tier. It's not open sourced. It's heavily used in the enterprise environment. The problems that I have with the free version, because this is a home lab, I don't have money to spend for ESXi, is that you don't get access to vSphere. And that's where all the fun stuff with ESXi comes in. And so without vSphere, it's hard to use ESXi. Now, as a home lab person, you can pay for a membership to something called vMug and get like $300 or so a year. I don't remember. You can a much cheaper license, but that's $300 a year every year that you're having to pay. And so if you're trying to learn a hypervisor to get a job working with that hypervisor, please leave the class and go learn about ESXi, because I've never met any company that uses Proxmox. They all use ESXi. But for us, and if you're just doing it for your home environment, Proxmox is amazing.
I use it at work.
You use it at work?
Deploying Proxmox.
And your work does it too? Okay, I'm learning that. Wait, how big are your companies? Are they less than 500 people?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All less than 500. That's why. Because it's about the money.
Mine's running on a $400 use server.
Are you paying for the subscription fees?
No.
I did it on a government server.
You did it on a government. Wow, okay, that's legit. The other one that's super exciting, I haven't seen in the corporate environment either, it's called Zen Server. It's really good. Sorry, it's not called Zen Server. I mean, it is, but it's called XCP-NG, and underneath it runs Zen. But XCP-NG is really awesome. It just does not do containers. And I liked XCP much better than Proxmox if you're doing pure fat VMs. But if you want to do containers, don't use XCP because you can't. And so we'll go all over that. But those are your main ones. ESXi, XCP-NG, Proxmox.
Hyper-V is used a lot.
And then Hyper-V, you're right. And then Hyper-V is the Windows one. And in fact, all of your Windows 10 professional installs, which most of you probably have if you're running Windows 10, you can use Hyper-V right now. And in fact, WSL for Linux uses Hyper-V underneath it for its little virtualization layer. It's actually really good. The UI for it isn't as good as the other ones until you start getting into having dedicated servers and all kinds of stuff. Then it can get really fun. Don't do Hyper-V without an Active Directory server. It's a pain in the butt.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's go. Let's get into it. And please, someone say a prayer for me because the demo gods are gonna probably kill me.
Flipper says that vMug Advantage is $200 annually.
Yes. Okay. vMug is $200 annually right now. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to install Proxmox in front of everyone. And I'm gonna hope it's gonna work. And then
Can you do it headless?
Can you tell everybody what you have in your network rack there?
Okay, so we'll talk about my network stack. So let me pull up that picture real fast. Can I make this bigger? Nope, that was the wrong thing to do. That was also the wrong thing to do. Whatever.
You can use the magnifier, I guess.
Yeah, let's use. Oh well, I'm on Linux. Is there a magnifier on Linux?
Orca?
That's a no.
That's a no. Okay, well.
It doesn't have Orca?
Here, let's just. Why don't I just do the webcam and bring it over there?
To a new slide.
Bash.
That's a good idea. Okay, so yeah, we'll just move the camera so I can point to stuff. So I have. This is what I have in here. I have a Supermicro mini server underneath. We'll talk about basically this is it's got a Xeon processor with, I think I put in 128, maybe 256 gigs of RAM in there. Yeah, it's small for that. And then on the back of it, it has 8 Ethernet ports and 2 10 gig SPF ports. On top, and I'll post the model for you guys in Discord or on the YouTube description later. I have a Brocade switch. This is the 7150 CP12. It has like 12 1 gig ports, 2 1 gig stacking ports, and then 2 10 gig stacking ports. And then I have an Intel NUC on top here. This one we're not going to install right now, but it's currently running TrueNAS, and it's going to be a network storage for our VMs. We will probably set it up over NFS. And then here I have a GL-iNet router. It's just being a router, you know, giving out DHCP and all that stuff. So that's the setup. So what I'm going to do is, this is the Supermicro server. Oh, actually we can look at the specific model in here.
What did that run you?
How much did this run me? I don't want to talk about it.
Just talking the Supermicro.
So the Supermicro cost, it was like $600 for the server, and then couple, I don't remember how much for the RAM, but it was expensive because it's DDR4, and then I have 2 1 terabyte NVMEs in there that are really fast, so those are also pretty expensive. So it's pretty expensive. You don't have to make it this expensive though. Proxmox runs on almost everything. So I just built this for my small setup. So the server that I'm running is the SYS SYS-E308D. All right, cool. So we're going to shut the server down. So let's just power it off. And we're going to install Proxmox. So I'm using, okay, if you guys haven't used one of these before, it's an IODD. I have the mini version, but they have a bigger version that takes hard drives. It emulates CD drives and flash drives from files. So you'll plug it into your computer, you'll set it to the hard drive mode, and then you'll be able to see a bunch of stuff on the hard drive, a bunch of different ISOs, and then you unplug it and then plug it into your device, and then you just select from a list of which ISO you want it to be. It emulates a CD drive, and that ISO is plugged into the CD drive. So it's probably one of the coolest things I've ever bought.
What's it called?
It's IODD.
Mini?
And I have the mini, which is the expensive one, but you can get the one with the hard drive. And it's less expensive, and you can choose better storage. Alright, so if you don't have one of these, you can just type Proxmox. You'll go to the downloads page, and they have a bunch of stuff in here for you to download. What you want to grab is the Proxmox Ve Installer. And then you can just use a tool like Rufus or Win32 Disk Imager on Windows, or you can use straight up DD on Linux and Mac to write that ISO to a flash drive. But that's the one you want to grab. And then let's turn the server back on. And let's install it. You just get to hear the fans whir for a minute. They will quiet down in just a bit.
Guessing the big one you have to put your own drive in. Just an enclosure. The bigger one's an enclosure. You just put your own drive in it.
The bigger what?
IOD.
Yes, the bigger IOD you have to put your own drive in. This one came with a drive, which is probably why it was more expensive. So it does not do NVMe. It does mSATA. And the controller inside will limit the speed to really slow anyways. So the faster speed of an NVMe is not worth it. Yeah. Okay, so F11 for the boot menu. Okay. So it did not see my drive. Okay, that's no fun. I need to type macro. There we are. So I have to reboot it. I didn't select it right, and it.
How are you getting a display out without Proxmox installed?
So you're asking how I'm getting a display out without Proxmox installed? This little server has IPMI built into it.
Okay.
Right? And so I'm using the IPMI for the class. You would usually just use it with the monitor and keyboard physically at the machine, right? But I picked something so that we could actually show it all on the same screen really easily. Okay, while this is coming up, because this is going to take a minute, there is a discussion that I wanted to have with you guys. That was really important. So, the big reason why I chose Proxmox was that it did containers instead of just flat virtual machines, right? What is the difference between virtual machines and containers?
No OS overhead.
Resource consumption.
Okay, we've got resource consumption. No OS is what's being said, okay?
No, I just said no OS overhead.
No OS overhead. Okay.
You only run one copy of the kernel.
You only want to run a copy of the kernel. Okay, so I'm going to correct one of those. Containers can have OSs in them.
Well, in them.
Docker containers do not. And we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between Docker and Lxc. But the big thing here is, and we'll just go through this chart together, you've got your hardware on the server, and then you've got your operating system. In this case, it is Proxmox. Okay, inside of Proxmox with a VM, you then have a hypervisor. Proxmox uses the Linux hypervisor called KVM. And a lot of, like, Debian and other instances will use stuff like libvirt to management. The fun part is Proxmox does that under the hood too. It has a lot of fancy wrapper stuff to a lot of those. So you've got a hypervisor. What's a hypervisor? Do we know do we want to talk about that?
Virtual machines.
Virtual machines, okay.
Yeah, it's
Virtual networking.
a piece of software that does the managing of those virtual machines and makes it sure that they have what they need to run.
Exactly. So he said the piece of software that does the managing of the virtual machines so that they have what they need to run. I'm going to expound just a tiny bit. A hypervisor will emulate hardware for the thing that's running to do. So it will have a pretend video card. It will have a pretend USB controller. It will have pretend hard drives. All of these things that are running in software on Proxmox, but the computer that's running inside doesn't see Proxmox or see anything there, or doesn't even interact with the kernel. It just thinks it's a computer running somewhere else with its own virtualized hardware. And so with each VM, you have that hypervisor, which has a lot of overhead for virtualizing that hardware, including a lot of speed losses, as well as things like you have to give a VM a memory. But it used to be that you had to give a set amount of memory. So you like take the amount of memory on your host, say, okay, I want to use this much in this VM, and that's all it can use, whether it's being used or not. Now there are drivers that you can install into VMs that will do things called like balloon memory, where it will grow or shrink based on how much memory is actually being used. But each VM doesn't know anything about each other, and they don't know how much memory is being used, and that's just the hypervisor that has to figure that all out together. The difference between that and what a container does is a container doesn't virtualize hardware at all. What Linux does with its container system is they've built, how do I say, they have a thing called C groups. So I remember, let me make sure. Yes, so they use C groups, which is basically, well, we won't get into that. That's a whole topic in and of itself. But they use C groups to create namespaces in memory, so that basically there's sets of bit memory that is allocated for this namespace, and you can put applications into those namespaces and run them and use them, and they can't mess with things in other namespaces. So what that does is that means everything, when you create a container, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to create this namespace or this area or this box that things go into that it can't get out of and mess with stuff that are outside of its namespace. But it's still running on top of the same kernel, the same operating system, everything. It's not pretending to be a different hardware. It has the same access that everything else has to the hardware. If you install drivers onto the host OS, that container has same access to use those drivers because it's all shared. The benefit for that is you have a lot lower memory usage because you're not have all that overhead of that virtualizing the hardware or trying to do ballooning, things like that. As well as it's a lot faster. Now, some applications don't like being put in containers, especially if they need privileged access to certain resources like networking and different things, and so it doesn't work for every environment. You'll notice that some things can't be used in Docker containers and they have to be run in a VM. It's just the nature of the way that it works. Go ahead.
Is that due to like wanting a memory address and that memory address goes away when the memory balloon shrinks?
I have no idea what you're asking. I don't know is probably the best answer. I don't know.
The memory resource.
Question: How does Lxc
It's using the same memory.
how does Lxc have it, or how does Lxc have any more of an OS than Docker?
All it does is process isolate.
So we'll go over the difference between Docker and Lxc in a bit. Okay. But let's pop back. Oh, dang it! I got talking and we didn't. So I pre-installed Proxmox on this because I wanted to test everything before. So we'll go into Docker, the difference between Lxc and Docker, and I'm going to actually like remember this. Let's pull it up here. Okay, so we'll leave that there, and then we'll put okay, there we go. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between Docker and Lxc containers. So the way Docker is actually built on top of Lxc. Lxc was made first, and it's been around for a really long time. Docker came later and came to solve a different problem that Lxc, okay, perfect, didn't solve. So when you run a Docker container, and an Lxc, they both have that host OS. Okay, so I'm gonna come down and select the CD-ROM. Oh, perfect. Okay. And they both have access to the same host OS. Then Docker on top runs the Docker engine. And then inside you have an application and the container, or the application and the container are almost the same thing, right? And so when you look at a Docker container and you look at what's running, it's really built to run a single application, right? It doesn't, well, I'll show you as we install one, but it doesn't have a whole operating system inside of it. It doesn't have, you know, all the libraries or anything. In fact, the Docker engine has a lot of shared libraries that different, like Alpine, different things use. They share. LXC tries its best to pretend to be as much as it can to be a full VM. So when you start an LXC container, you get that same prompt that says, please log in, username, password, right? And then you log in and it's like, cool, now let's set up cron, let's set up systemd, you know, all that normal stuff that you have in a VM that Docker containers don't. To build a Docker container, you really have to like write a Docker config file. You have to say, I want you to run this one script, and that's all you're going to do. And there will be all your supporting libraries are around it, and you can call to them, but that's all you run. You don't run a whole operating system with systemd and the init, everything. And so that's kind of the main difference. And as you use it, it's very, if you've used, I don't know how many people who have, but if you've used jails on FreeBSD, very, very similar to jails, where it's just something that pretends to be a machine. Okay, hopefully that answered those questions. Okay, so let's install Proxmox. It's really easy. We're going to not read the EULA, because who does? And then you're going to choose your install OS. So I'm going to choose my SATA drive, because I have a 1 terabyte SATA and then 2 1 terabyte NVMEs in here. So I'm going to choose the SATA, and then in here you can choose a file system. So I really like to use ZFS for some of its fancy features, and there are some features that Proxmox has that it only has when you use ZFS on your storage. So for now, I'm just going to not use those other drives and just use my 1 terabyte. Oh, SATA. Can you guys see it all right? No? Okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and just set that, and then I'm going to click next. Country, United States. We're in Utah, so I'm going to choose Denver. Password, we're going to do DC801. And then nice and secure email. You can use this. I'm just going to set it to be bashNinja at 801 Labs. Sure, whatever. You don't need to use it. Go ahead.
What file system did you use again?
So I used ZFS. So let me go back real quick and just show you, because that's really important. So I came in to it and I selected file system ZFS, and then I did RAID 0 because I'm only have one drive, and then I selected the hard disk that I want the OS installed onto, and then because I had 3 drives, they show up in hard disk 1 and 2. I selected do not use on those, and you can go into the advanced options and change these. I would suggest leaving them alone. They have really good defaults.
Is it pretty tough to flip on RAID and configure RAID later if you want to check in more drives later?
So ZFS is not very great right now on adding RAID later.
So make up your mind now.
Make up your mind now, or plan on just doing a backup of your VMs, rebuilding your machine, and then restoring them, which is what I do all the time. It's not too hard. Okay, so United States, everything's the same. Perfect. So this is where you set the host name. This is actually important to set right, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to change it later. So I named it navu.hackerland.party. That's the domain that I have. It's really fun. So you can either say Navu is from the Church of Jesus Christ or from the TV show The Expanse. But I have been naming all of my servers after Expanse ships. So set your IP address, your gateway. 8. Oh geez, numblock is killing me. 8.1. 8.1. Okay. And then bam, that's it. That's all we have to do. It's super easy to install Proxmox and get it up and running. There's a few more setup we'll need to do in a minute, and we'll get to that. Your question.
Clipper is asking in the chat, is this just for the base install, or is this base install plus space to put VMs, containers, etc.?
So what happens is it depends on how you want to set up your networking. Personally, I will create a small hard drive that's just for base install. But you can also store things like ISOs and other stuff in there. You can even store things like VMs. But I just don't like to do that because I don't want that to be hit a lot. But because mine's so big, it's a terabyte SATA, I am going to put VMs in there because otherwise I'm wasting space, right? But if I was building a new server that had plenty of space inside, I'd just get a cheap, 120 gig, just a 120 gig SATA drive from eBay for like $10 or $15, one of the Intel ones, and that would do really, really well. Hopefully I answered that question. We will set up additional storage in a minute with those other two drives. Any other questions while we wait for this 15% to finish?
Transferring VMs from other, so I've got a bunch of VirtualBox VMs.
Oh.
And I want those to transfer over to Proxmox. How much pain am I in for?
Okay. So the question is, how much pain am I in for if I want to transfer VMs from VirtualBox to Proxmox?
Or from ESXi.
Or from ESXi. And I will tell you right now, it's a pain in the butt. But it's not as bad as you would expect. So we have actually run into that here at the Hackerspace because we've been trying to transfer VMs from VlanTag to our Proxmox server here. And it's not too hard to transfer the disk. That works just fine. It's not too hard to import the disk and make the VM run. What always seems to happen with us is that the networking dies when you load the VM. So if you have root access to your machine, you will just have to go into the VM, and what has happened with all of our Linux machines is that the networking interface has changed names. So you just go and change your settings to be whatever the new networking interface is, and then you're done. It's not hard, and it's not too bad, but it's really hard if you don't have access to it.
The networking interface for the VMs is changing? Or?
Yes, so because we're emulating hardware, Proxmox is emulating a different type of Ethernet card than what VirtualBox or VMware emulates. Yeah, and so it thinks you've plugged in you've unplugged a NIC and plugged in a different one, and so it gives it a new name, right?
So as long as you have physical access to your host,
yes, as long as you have password to the host, you should be fine. Our problem with VlanTag was that it's VlanTag. We don't have access to a root on the box, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. In fact, if you want a guide on that, I'll pull it up later, but there is instructions on, I'll pull it up later. There's instructions on doing that type of a transfer, and it's not too bad. So we'll just let this boot. While it's, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is Lxc based?
So VlanTag is not Lxc based. It is based purely in fat virtual machines. VirtualBox primarily because it's free and open source, and VMware costs money.
do you have a preference in case you go to Lxc over Docker or vice versa?
So
Totally just depends on what you want to use.
So here's the deal. The question is do I have a preference between Lxc and Docker? And this is a question that gets asked all the time. No, I have no preference. In fact, I do have a preference. My preference is Docker because it usually means somebody else has built it for me. But there's a lot of times that Docker has not been, like the container for what I want it to do has not been created, or it's a piece of junk, or I don't trust the person who makes it. So at those points, I will then do Lxc containers.
So you literally just use Docker if there's something pre-built that you can use.
Yes. Exactly. And in fact, if you're looking for Docker containers, this group, linuxserver.io, has the best slew of Docker containers of anything you could want. They have Doku Wiki, which is a great wiki server. They have MB, which is very similar to Plex. They have Plex servers. They have like almost any tool that you could think of. They have SyncThing. They have just everything in here. And so they're a great source of containers if you're looking for some really well-managed Docker containers. So my gist is if it's in this list, I usually use it from Docker. If it's not, I usually build it myself.
Can you update from this?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Not from their UI, but they will do regular updates. I don't remember the cadence, but it's, what'd you say?
Elk.
Is Elk in here? No, Elk, I don't, well, let's see. No, I don't see it.
Elasticsearch.
Yeah,
Try Elasticsearch.
Nope. Now, here's another trick if you're looking for containers. This is another piece of virtualization software I didn't talk about, but there's one called Unraid. Unraid's really good, and we can talk about that later. I love Unraid, and I've used it for years, but have since switched to Proxmox. But they have a thing called community applications that you can import these applications into your Unraid server.
Super easy.
Super easy. I don't use their community applications, but I do use their search for it. Because then you can come in here and type in like Elasticsearch, and you can see somebody's repository that they built for Unraid, right? And be like, oh, this is useful. Let's go look at their Docker container. And you can, and they usually will have, you know, instructions on how to set it up. They have a support forum where you can like pretend you're on Unraid and ask for support if you need to, if their container's not working. It's just a good place to look for actively maintained Docker containers. So I've liked this a lot too. This is the other place I will go and search for stuff. And then go look at their support forum, see if I trust the author, things like that.
Unraid's not free.
Elasticsearch.
Unraid is not free. That's the other problem, is it's not free.
Containers, yes, just use their official
Oh,
ones.
okay, well, that's never mind.
Okay, all right. So let's pull up. So it looks like it's up, and we can hit the IP address. This is really small, but I'm going to tell you what it is. You type the HTTPS, then you type the IP, and then the port you access it is 8006. If you forget, it shows it right here on the login screen, but you have to do 8006 to access it, and then you just use the credentials that you created with the username root, and I did DC801. So here's our, you do not have a valid subscription, please, you can ignore that.
Every time you log in.
Every time you log
Every time
in,
you log in,
that's
it'll
going to pop up, and it's kind of annoying, but we don't pay for it, so it is what it is. So let's talk a little bit about Proxmox. Let's talk about how it's laid out, what it looks like, and how it's set up. So the way Proxmox works is is this big enough? Can you see? Okay, perfect. You have two on this left tab, this server view tab. You have two important things. You have data center, which is your whole data center, which is all the different Proxmoxes that you can have, because you can have multiple Proxmox hosts all managed from the same UI. And in there you have nodes, and I'm using these terminology so that you, as you see them in the thing, will recognize them. I named this node that we just installed, I named it Nauvoo, right? Inside there, when I click here and open up Nauvoo, you can see everything that this node has. Right now, it only has 2 local storages. It has no VMs, it has no containers, all it has is local storage. So let's dig a little bit into this. The first thing we want to do, because if you looked at the download, it was last built on December 7th, so we want to do updates. And so, because we're not on the paid version of Proxmox, we click on our node, then we scroll down to updates, and then we click on repositories. It's going to say, hey, you don't have an enterprise repository, you're not going to be able to update. Alright, it's like, well, okay, I don't really want to pay for it, so I have to zoom out because it's not letting me scroll. So I come down here and click on the enterprise and highlight it, and I will click disable because we're not enterprise customers. Then we will go to add. It's going to complain again, you really don't have a subscription. and then I'm going to add the no subscription repository.
I used to have to do this in the command line.
You used to have to do this in the command line. No longer do. And then they had it in their wiki, but it was a pain in the butt to figure out. Now they have it in here. So it's here now. You can do that. So you need to add that no subscription. It's going to say, hey, it's not recommended for production use, because again, they're not going to support it because you're not paying them. But whatever, not my problem. It is my problem, but I don't really care. Go ahead.
How is this different than just going to shell and updating like you would a regular Linux server?
So this is no different. So all this is doing, if you look right here, is it's hard to see. It's editing the etc apt sources.list file. And so all we're doing is adding different repositories to that sources.list. And then to actually update it, you can click refresh. And what it's doing is it's doing an apt get update.
Oh, okay.
And it says it right there. It's just doing an apt get update.
Okay, so that's what I've just been going to the console and just doing an update and then upgrade.
Yep, and that's it. That's all you need to do.
Okay,
so
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So then you can see all the packages that apt get update told them to use. And basically what they're doing is they're parsing it and putting it in a pretty UI for you to look at. And then you can hit upgrade. And what does upgrade do? Apt dist dash upgrade. It's just the same thing. It's a Linux box. We all love Linux, right?
Okay, I was afraid
but it puts a little UI around it and makes it really convenient. And it's kind of why I love Proxmox so much. Is they are a Debian based distro, and they're very much using the built-in stuff to do what you need to do, just putting a fancy wrapper around it. So we'll let it update. It's going to update a bunch of packages. It's also going to update our kernel and different things like that. And we like that. I have never had a problem updating and having it cause me problems until you do major version upgrades. So I have in the past, sorry, let me rephrase. Every single time I have done major version upgrades, it has broken my Proxmox install. It's probably because I'm doing something wrong. But, whatever. It's easy enough to back up and re-put back up, so it's never been a problem for me. And you don't do big version updates very often anyways. Go ahead.
Like how broken? Like a VM's gone broken?
Like it won't boot.
Like it won't boot.
Yeah.
But theoretically the VMs are
They're still there. So like the last time I broke it, it wouldn't boot. And I had done a backup, but I didn't back up one of my VMs correctly. And so I was able to just go into my share with another Linux OS, import my Z pool, and then just grab my stuff off of it. It was just fine. It was no problem. Go ahead.
I will say one thing that Proxmox does right is backups and restores.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that with EXXI, even if you're paying for vSphere.
So he's saying that Proxmox does backup and restores really well, better than vSphere. Well, I thought you could do backups and restores with vSphere.
Not easily.
Not easily?
It's easier to pay for Veeam or some other backup tool to do
Ah, easier to pay for another backup tool. Okay.
Do they own Veeam
Unless
too?
Veeam
No.
purple screens your ESXi.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we will get to backups in a bit. So we're done with, we'll let the updates run under, down here. While we're doing the updates, let's set up our storage. And so I want to talk a little bit about storage. There's two places to go to storage, and this is really important. You have local storage on the VM, and then you have network storage. So if we want to, sorry, when I said local storage on the VM, I meant local storage on the node. So in this case, on Nauvoo, this server that I installed. So we're gonna set up local storage right now, and then I will take a quick second and show you the network storage. And the reason why this is important is because network storage is available to all nodes that exist. So if you have multiple VMs and you want to be able to migrate a VM from one host to another host, they better have a shared storage that they both can access. And so here, we'll just look at this real quick. So if we click on our node and then we go to disks, we can see our local storage here. And you can see different types, right? We can see here's our ZFS, here's one pool. You can see that these other ones have nothing. But if we go to our data center, there's also storage in here. This will show us our local storages, but it it will also allow us to add those network storages that's accessible to everything within the data center, so all nodes. Anyway, let's go back to the node itself, Nauvoo, and let's add some more ZFS boxes. Now, this is something I did on purpose. When I click Create ZFS and I'm looking for a disk, it says that there are no unused disks. This is annoying because we know that we have 2 disks that we haven't done anything with. Why are they not showing up? Proxmox requires that your disks be completely wiped. No GPT, like no partition table, nothing. It wants it empty. Yeah, and it took me a while to figure that out the first time. So what I will do is I will click on my disk here and I will wipe it. I hope I have nothing important on there. And then I'll come in and wipe this other one. Being careful that I'm not wiping my SDA, which is the one that I installed the boot stuff onto. Okay.
Does it want it formatted as something, or just have it just completely blank?
It wants it blank.
It will format it.
It will format. So now when I come in here, they both show up. So here I have a 2 terabyte NVMe, and here I have a 1 terabyte. So with this, just like if we, I mean, it's ZFS, we can create any of our ZFS that we're used to. Like if we want to do RAID Z2 with 6 disks like you normally would, it's here. If you want to turn on and off compression, it's here. What is not here is encryption. Encryption in ZFS is not exposed to the GUI. It is just straight ZFS on Linux, so you can do encryption through the command line, but it is not exposed to the GUI, which is too bad, but whatever. Now, since I don't have enough disks that are the same size, I'm just going to create 2 separate single disk ZFS shares, whatever. And so I'm going to name this one, this one's my fast drive because it's the Samsung, so I'm going to call it Warp Speed. And then I'm going to create this other one because it's 2 terabytes. I'm going to call it Large Buddy. And so now we have those 2. Oh, I want to make that bigger. These 2 here, and we see them show up. Now you can see these drives, and you can see them all show up here. So did you see how I had a question mark on there and then it kind of popped in? That was because the UI hadn't quite figured out that it was added yet. When you see that question mark on your storage drives, it means that it, for some reason, cannot access it. That's not really important on local storage, but when you get into network storages, that's important to be aware of. Okay, so let's check our updates. It's still updating. Fun. Okay.
It's almost done.
It's almost done. It's just building the init RAM. So now I want to show you something more. So here's some important stuff to know. There's different types of files in Proxmox that can be stored, and you need to be able to tell your storage. So if you look at this local, you see how it says ISO images, containers, different things, and you click on these other ones and they have different stuff. That means on these other ones we cannot store ISO files. What? Why not? That's tough. It's because if you come in here and you look at these, you can see that each type of storage has content types. And you can come in here and you can see, okay, I can create a disk image, containers, and that's it. A really fun thing to do is, well, we'll talk about this in a minute. Something that's really important to do is to enable thin provisioning. This makes it so that your disk images and your containers, let's say that you create an image with 100 gigabytes but for your VM, but you only use like, I don't know, 10 gigabytes. You really want that 100 gigabytes used? That depends. If you're really big on performance and you really need that block allocated, you want the whole thing allocated, you just want it always there. But if you're like, yeah, I don't mind taking performance hit, I'd rather save the storage, thin provision it. And what that will do is it will gradually expand the space that's actually being used on that ZFS drive. So if you're only using 10 gigabytes on the hard drive, it's actually really going to only use 10 gigabytes, even though the VM or container is allocated significantly more. So let's do that to these ones here. Let's enable thin provisioning because that's super useful. And see how this one it's already pre-enabled. It's because Proxmox knows that's important. So we'll enable that, and then we still cannot store those other file types, ISOs. So here we'll look at the whole list. Disk images, you know, all these things. We cannot do that. That's just because the way that ZFS storage is. So I'm going to create, let me make sure I do this right. There we go. So I am going to create a directory thing. So let's see if it'll tell us. Actually, let's just SSH right into it. So let's take a look. So I want to show you how those are exposed in the Linux file system. SSH root at 192.168. Yeah, I know. There you go. 8.5, yes. Nope, the password is DC801. So if I do an ls/, which is just showing the folders, you can see that it has created 2 folders here for those 2 ZFS shares. If you ever want to look and see where they are, you can use the mount command. This is really formatted because I'm zoomed in so much, but it will tell you that warp speed is mounted at /warp speed, and that large buddy is mounted at /large buddy, and that rpool is mounted on /rpool, and that in here we have 2 types of data sets called root and data that are mounted at rpool/root and rpool, right? If you're used to ZFS, these will look really familiar to you. But something that what I was showing you is that we have this warp speed folder here. CD/warp speed. And so I can just look in there and see that it's empty. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory in here that'll say I want it to be ISO images, and I'm going to give it the ID of warp, just so I know warp ISO. And the directory is going to be /warp speed /ISOs. And then I'm going to restrict it to a single node. You are straight right. I do need a capital S. And I'm not going to let it be shared. Okay? And then we'll just add it. Now, if we look in here, it has created this folder called ISOs. And then when you come up, we have a new storage type that allows us to have ISOs in here. Okay? So while we'll do that, what Linux distro should we install?
Or Hannah Montana Linux.
Oh, geez. Let's do an easy one, not Hannah Montana.
Puppy.
We'll do...
Puppy.
Gentoo.
No, not Gentoo. Okay, fine. I'm going to pick...
Temple OS.
We're going to use Ubuntu. Temple OS. My
You should have known better than that. They're going to try to sabotage your demo, make it as hard as possible.
So I'm just going to... While we do stuff, I'm going to have it download an ISO for us.
You can download shit.
Oh yeah, I
No,
can.
download
Let's do it that
URL,
way.
From URL.
Let's do it that way. That's more
I
fun.
don't know if it actually lets you know anything about it.
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Okay, so well, you can. So with Proxmox, with ISO image, you can either upload from your local file system, right, or you can have it download from a URL. Ooh boy. Let's.
You might need to leave all that key on there.
You think? Let's try. So I query it, it's able to get the MIME type and the file name that the server responds with. And we can like check the hash, that if we want to give it a checksum so that, you know, like you can, so that we know that when it downloads it's correct. But whatever, we're just gonna go crazy. We're not even, let's verify search. We should do that. And it starts to download it. Now, here's an annoying part. I mean, it's going to take 5 minutes for it to download on our internet. I can actually close that, and it will continue to run down in the bottom. In fact, all of our running tasks are down here. And when it says shell, what that shell is I'm going to close that. It's this terminal session that we're doing the apt-get upgrade. right? And so when I close this shell saying it's done updating, I don't need it anymore, this is going to stop spinning and realize that it's finished. I will eventually. You'll see it in a few minutes. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then it's just this awesome audit log that you don't see on other operating systems of what you've done, and you want to say, oh, what happened here? You double click on it, it tells you, like, we didn't see this, we just clicked the white button and it worked, but we could actually go and see everything that it did, all the output that it did, because it's a wrapper around Linux commands, and so it's just putting the standard out here, and you can look at the history of what has happened on your box. You can see that, oh, when it created our ZFS, we can see the exact zpool command they use. Sorry.
Is it just doing a standard out with additional velocity?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anyway, so that's awesome. So we'll let that download, and while that downloads for a VM, let's download something for a container. So let's see. Now in this ISO section, well, we'll do it on the local drive. So this one's already set up, but we could, if we want to, in that data center section, create one for that well, here I've got ISOs that not just does ISOs, it has something called container templates. We won't do that right now. We'll just use the one that's already set up, which is our local one that came when we installed it. And let's go to the container templates. So Proxmox has some templates for Lxc containers. And you click on that template, you can see all of them here. There's plenty of really common ones. You've got your Cent 7, your Debian 11, you've got Rocky Linux, which is what everyone's using instead of Cent now, and Arch, Alpine. I mean, everything's in here. Gentoo. Who thought Gentoo would be so easy to install, right? It's in here. So I'm gonna grab. Go ahead.
There is a way. It's a command that you run to refresh this list from the command prompt, and then it'll give you the list of all of the turnkey Linux containers that you can also use.
Yes, you can add additional stuff to here, right? And you can add it from anywhere. This is just the one that Proxmox provides. They're just Lxc templates. So if you Google,
they offer turnkey Linux as well. You just have to refresh the package list in Proxmox. It'll download a list of all of the current turnkey Linux ones.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. So he's saying that we can get turnkey Linux to pop up. I have never done this, so this seems.
What is turnkey Linux?
Okay, question is, what is turnkey Linux?
It's a Linux container source.
So turnkey Linux, they have, let's see, basically tons of applications that are just pre-built OSs for whatever, kind of like Docker. So let's say this one's really interesting. OwnCloud. So if you want to set up an OwnCloud server, they have a turnkey Linux appliance for it, which
run just like a VM basically.
And so if you look here, they have a VMDK you can install from an ISO. They have, well, it says question mark. I'm not sure what that means. They have a Docker link for it. Everything's in here. And so they basically just set it up for you, and they have all the instructions, and you don't have to deal with the mess that is the install. Go ahead.
The command is pveam space update.
Okay, so he's saying the command is pveam space update. So let's pull up a shell on this. So I could do it through here, but I'm going to show you the other way to do a shell. You click on your node, you just click the shell button. Bam, you're in. Space update.
So those, when you were showing those other container templates, are those basically just the kernel to run your containers in?
No, because we're using a shared kernel. They're just basically a file system. So it's just a tar GZ of a bunch of files for a file system.
So you have to download those before you can even install containers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so let's pull this back up again. I was doing local container templates. So here's all the turnkeys. Oh, Jenkins server, yay.
What is that?
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Okay, so let's grab, I'm just gonna grab Ubuntu because that's what I like to use, because everyone uses it. But so what it's doing is it's grabbing just a tar GZ of list of files for it, and it's saving it to there, and it'll show up. Again, I don't want to do it. We'll let that run in the background, and we'll go back to VMs. So our VM ISO image is done downloading. It's not in this local, it's here in warp ISOs, which is what we created. And let's create a VM. So you have these two buttons up here on the top, create container or create VM. So let's name this DC801 demo. Sure, demo. And then, well, we won't get into resource pools. That's a thing for another day. This is an important checkbox to be aware of, the start at boot. When it says start at boot, that means start at boot of your Proxmox server. It depends on your use case if you'll be turning on and off your server a lot, but there's some things you just want always running. So we probably want ours to always run. They've got this the delay and different orders for controlling that boot up, because sometimes some applications have dependencies of other servers that must be running first. You can set that all up here. Okay, the operating system, we're going to just choose the ISO that we downloaded by picking that it was on the ISO storage. Bam, that's done. You know, we're not going to get into any of this. I'm going to enable this QEMU agent. We'll talk about that later, but I'm enabling it. So here we have our disk size. Right now, it's going to create a raw disk image. This is going to just fill up and create a block and use 32 gigs of disk storage. If I switch the type from SCSI to a vert IO block, this will actually, a vert IO block will actually allow us to expand. So I choose warp speed. It's still saying the format is there, but this will allow us to do thin provisioning. So that's what we
set the bus to not 0.
And so here we can create multiple drives if we want to. What do you mean set the bus? That's just which device it is on the bus. So like if you create a second one, that's one, right? And if you share them, then you're going to have a big problem. Anyways, so then let's give it 2 cores. We can so I have the advanced checked if you don't notice. Let's just give it 2 cores. You can select the type, so you can emulate one or like do whatever. I like to set it to be the host. Now what the host does is actually, it makes it the actual type of what your host is using. Now this can be funny. You want to change these if you're, for example, if you're trying to run malware or things inside, you want the malware to not know you're running inside of a VM. Things like changing those will be helpful. There's no harm in leaving that to be the default KVM64 either. Let's just leave it 2 gigs of RAM. Okay, we'll get into networking later, but this is really important, and this firewall checkbox is really cool too. And then we'll just create it. Alright, so that is creating the container, and so we can click console here and we can see that it's booting, but that's really small, so I'm just going to click this console button.
It's crazy fast compared to Hyper-V with great speeds and stuff.
And so here it is just booting from the ISO disk. Alright, I don't know if you guys actually want me to do an install of a VM. I don't think you do. Yeah, so I will just pop into this and install this every few seconds and take a look at it, because I do want to show some of the networking fanciness. But let's go do containers, because containers are where it's really cool.
pfSense or OpenSense is my vote for container. Or if we can do that in container.
You can. So container and networking don't work very well.
Okay.
Like fancy networking, because you're using the host level networking. So he was suggesting running a router inside of a container, and I suggest that being a bad idea.
Even setting it up to work with the VPN is a lot of
Yes,
work.
so even setting up to work with a VPN is a pain in the butt.
You can make it work.
Can you run a Plex server in a container?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. In fact, most of us do.
How hard is it to move, what do they call it, metadata over to a Plex server container?
How by metadata you mean Plex metadata? The same way as if you're migrating to a normal from one machine to another. It's very
Docker
simple.
CP.
It's just copy file, copy paste, right? So let's create a container real quick. I'm gonna name this one. We did DC 801 demo. Now let's do 801 Labs demo. Yeah, let's give it. So here we get more granular. Like we create a password. So let's do 1234 1234.
We're rocking today in the security world.
Oh, the minimum length is 5. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is one of my favorites. You can add a public. You can add a public key already. So let's just grab my public key. / By the way, if you guys didn't know, GitHub hosts your public keys. So I use the same public key for GitHub for logging into my machines. Okay, so let's just paste that in here. You can load it straight from a file or paste it. It works great. Nope, nothing fun in the advanced. So we need to choose a template. And it needs to know where it comes from. Now, right now, we only have one local storage that we saved our container templates to. So that's local, and then that's the Ubuntu that we, tar.gz that we downloaded. That could have been the turnkey that we grabbed. And then we need to choose where to store it. Now, it doesn't really matter for this instance. I'm going to do it on the local, well, let's do it on large buddy, why not? And I'm going to do a really small 8 gigabytes. Because I want to show you some fun stuff with it. CPU, 2 cores. So all of this looks very similar to a Linux VM, right? Like you're setting the core limit, you're setting how much memory you want it to have max, you're even setting up networking, right? And we're going to do DHCP networking. We can choose which of our networking interfaces we want to do. Currently we only have one because we haven't set it up. And we can even get fancy and tag our network with VLANs, which can get really funky and really fun. But I'll show you more about that later. You can set your DNS. We'll use the same host settings, and then we'll start it after it's created. So while that runs, let's quickly install this VM. So okay. Wow, it is really bad. Nope. This one was DC 801 demo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The server name is going to be different than those. If you could have them completely different, if you want them, right?
That's fine. And in here, I'm going to also import my my GitHub key. So that's installing. Now our container's already done. Oh wait, what are you doing, buddy? Oh my gosh. I'll just close it.
Question from Discord.
Question?
Is the VLAN from Kipper, is the VLAN tagging at the container/VM level the preferred method versus building bridges with different tags on it and then assigning the container or the VM to the right?
I will answer that question when we get to networking. Okay. In fact, let's just do it. Let's go straight to networking because that was next on my list anyways. So while those are installing, real quick, I want to show you a container. This is the difference between Docker and Lxc containers. This is a container where you actually log in, the username and password. Nope, I typed the wrong password. There we go. And you actually have normal stuff running. Like container doesn't, and you have everything here. You log into it, it acts very much like a VM, except you're in a container environment anyways. So there's that. Okay, let's close that. We don't actually need it. Let's set up networking. So networking. Networking is individual to the nodes. I don't like it as much, but it makes a lot of sense. I wish there was some sort of a templating networking system that I could do instead of having to go to each node and set it up, but there's not, so you just get to do it at every single node. And let's talk about it. This is just using Linux bridges and bonds and VLAN tags. It doesn't do anything other than that. I mean, it has OVS stuff, but it's the same concept, right? Just using the OVS system instead. So there are people here who had questions about networking. I'm just gonna set up a quick little network that's super common, and maybe you can ask questions afterwards. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, right now we have a single Linux bridge. Is that big enough? Yeah, there we go. And then let's put this over here. A Linux bridge, and this Linux bridge is for the operating system, and it you assign a static. Well, so I have a static IP set for it, 192.168.8.5. Now that was set up when we did the install, right? In here you have your bridge ports. These are the physical ports on your server that you're selecting for it to use. Let's say we wanted to, right now I have it bridged to this port 1. But let's say I wanted to make sure that if that network cable was ever unplugged for some reason, that port 2 also worked. I would just come in here, do a space, and then DENO2, right? And it's going to say, hey, here are all the changes that we're making. Let me zoom out a little bit. If you look, we're just editing our Etsy network interfaces file, like norm, and you can see the actual changes that it's going in and making. So I'm just going to quickly apply that. And now that that's done, I'm going to move the network port from slot 1 to slot 2. And we'll see if it still works. Yeah, so if I refresh, it's still working because I enabled slot 2 now. This is so what I like to do with this one is I'll come in here and comment this and call it management, right? So it's for the management network, and it just puts it right there in a comment. Then I like to create, so usually with your management networks in a normal environment, and this is a whole other topic talking about setting up a network, but you will do your management stuff untagged, and then a lot of your VMs and stuff will get put onto tagged networks. So, for example, at the hackerspace, our guest network is tagged for 10, VLAN 10, and our servers are tagged for VLAN 40. Now, let's say we wanted to add a new server to our servers network here at the hackerspace. We want to do it on VLAN 40. So there's two ways that you can do this. Clipper's question alluded to one of the ways, and then there's the way that I like to do it, which is I like to create a VLAN tag here. So I will do VLAN 0.40. Now you can name it whatever you want following the naming conventions. This .40 is a Linux naming convention that says that this VLAN is on VLAN tag 40. And I think it's even more than just Linux. Like if you do whatever you want.
By putting that in the name, it'll superimpose that.
Yeah. So if I just type whatever I want, I can come in here and select 40. Come on, type 40. You can do it that way, and you can select the raw device, or you can just type VLAN.40 and see those gray out, because by just naming it that, it's pre-filling that. And then I will choose 192.168.40. Well, I'm not actually going to set this. So for this, if I wanted to be able to manage this instance from this VLAN, I would set, this to be .5, set it to be a static, give this Proxmox a static IP, and then I could access it on 40.5. By access it, I mean access the management interface. But we don't really want to do that. We only want this VLAN for our VMs. So in the comments, we're going to do VMs, or I think we called it server network. So what we called it here. And then I will do in parentheses V40. That's just how I like to remember. Go ahead.
It should be VLAN 0.40.
Why?
Because it autofills your hardware device names.
So, you mean like that?
Yeah.
So the VLAN here is the name of the interface. The 40 is the VLAN tag.
Okay.
So you've got, so it is being tagged as VLAN tag 40. You can't read it very well, but that's what it's saying here. It's really light. I'm sorry.
Right. So if you wanted to use the hardware VLAN 0, it has to be VLAN 0, right? Not just VLAN.
So if you want to use, you mean VLAN tag 0?
Yeah.
So VLAN tag 0 is kind of a weird thing in the networking world. Some appliances call it VLAN tag 0, and some people call it untagged.
Okay.
Right? So what you would just do is you would just instead of creating a VLAN Linux, you would just create a bridge, right? And that would be untagged. If you, well, maybe you could do 0. That might work. I've never done it.
Kipler seems to dislike that idea.
What idea?
You can't tag VLAN 0.
Well, you can in this one. They let you do it. It's weird. See, like, I can type 0 and it'll tag it as 0, but I'm going to do 40.
Apparently VLAN 0 doesn't like going up and down the chunk.
Unable to find parent VLAN. Whoa, what is going on? Create Linux VLAN dot 40.
And his other question is this Linux bond mode?
Oh, okay. So I see. Instead of it being VLAN 0 here, I'm supposed to choose a bridge
Interface,
or a
yeah.
bond that I'm doing. So I'm supposed to do VMBR 0 dot VLAN 40. That's what I'm supposed to do.
There we go.
So we're using Linux bond mode, not 802.380.
I have no idea.
Okay.
So if you look, that's what it's doing, is it's creating another, I mean, just in Linux networking, that's what it's doing. So we'll quickly apply that. And then I can come over to my container, go to networking, and I can change it from VMBR 0. Let me refresh the page. So it's not showing it there. Did I apply that network change, or is it still applying? Okay. Well, that's sad. It's not showing. It should be showing.
Does the VM need to be shut down while you change
It shouldn't, but here, we'll just do this. Let's shut it down. So this is a container. So let's shut the container down and see what it does. The question was, does it need to be shut down to change it? I don't think so. Let's try logging out. So we made that change. Usually they have you reboot after you make those main changes. In the last year or two, they've made it so that you can do it live without having to reboot. But it looks like it's not going to let me add it here. So we're going to reboot, unfortunately. Alright, so let's shut that VM down too.
So Kipler has instructions if you want to do it from the CLI.
Do what?
Do the bond setting from the CLI. The bridge.
Oh, we already created the bridge. It exists. It's just not showing in the UI.
Oh, okay.
That's the problem. Is that they haven't figured it hasn't figured it out yet. Well, how about this? I'm too slow. got really quiet.
We were scared of the loud fans to come.
Cool. So while that comes back up, let's take a look at our TrueNAS box. Oh, it's getting hot in here.
I think it might have something to do with your server.
Yeah, it might have everything to do with the server. Okay, so there's my TrueNAS server. So this is my TrueNAS box. I just want to show you real quick how it's set up so that you kind of can be aware. If I go to storage pools, all I have is a single pool with a 120 gig hard drive and then a single data set called Proxmox Backup. Okay, in here I've gone and I've created a NFS share to Proxmox Backup, and I've also created a Samba CIFS share. And these are important to know because later we'll use this, but this box here is serving the USB hard drive on top as a storage. Yeah, it's ghetto. Don't touch the right spot or you'll shock yourself. But it has a lid, but it could get too hot. And I did Kapton tape it.
It's completely safe.
It's safe enough. Yes, it is passive cooling, this little enclosure. So if we look, our Proxmox box is up, and it's already auto-started this VM. So now we should be able to come in here. What the heck? Oh, I know what I've done wrong. We didn't even need to reboot it. I am kind of annoyed.
Well, if it's something that you screwed up, it's something we'll definitely screw up. So it's fine.
Yeah, I have screwed it up. Okay, this is super fun. I love when things don't work like they did at my house. Hardware, network device, edit. Yeah, I really broke it, didn't I? VMBR0, VMBR0, fine, we'll do that. And then we'll create a new one.
Happy pickup line of the night. Baby, are you a server room? Because you're hot. I'll leave.
Thank you.
Slow clap, yeah.
Geez, I don't know why it's not working anymore. Well, I'll figure it out later.
Type in a Vlan tag.
Yeah, so we'll do it that way for now. We can type in a Vlan tag. Say this one's VLAN 40. Done. It could be, well, it could be that maybe I haven't enabled... Geez, this is really bugging me. I want it to work. Yeah, I'll figure it out later. But we should be able to create a bridge that has a VLAN tag, and then you can just add your devices to that bridge or that VLAN every single time, and it just works. Or we can come in here and set the tag manually per VM. Both of them work the same. There's just two methods of doing the same thing. So there's that. Backups. So one of the important things with backups is that we really want a network storage for this to go onto. We don't want it backed up on the same box. So I'm going to quickly set up the NFS share to this TrueNAS box that I showed you. 168.20 no, it was 8.20. So we're gonna name this Prox TrueNAS Backup, and I think it has to be all one word. I put the IP in here, and then if I click export, it's automatically pulling up the share that I'm doing. This mount backup Proxmox is on TrueNAS. This is because
it's already grabbing that from TrueNAS?
It's grabbing that from TrueNAS because it connected to the IP and said, what have you got? And TrueNAS came back and said, this is what I got.
So the second you typed server, it was already talking?
Probably the second I open this list.
Okay.
Right? And I'm going to enable, I mean, we can do all of these types, but I'm going to only do the backup files. And I'm going to enable it, and I'm going to let all nodes have access to it. You could restrict it to specific ones. We're going to do all nodes. And then with this specific one, yeah, we'll just leave it as that. We'll leave everything else as default. Fun fact about NFS, by default it has no password and it's not expecting to use passwords with TrueNAS. Sorry, with Proxmox. So you'll do IP restrictions. What I do at my home is I have direct cables going from my servers to my TrueNAS box, and I created a unique network for each one. And then I do that so that literally there's just an Ethernet cable plugged in the back of the server and then plugged straight into the back of the other server with static IPs, and it's worked really well. And when in here, I will set a host name. So let's just do that real quick, because if you have, so I will, when I do this, I will come into my node and I will edit. Let's see if I can find it. The hosts file. And so I will create 192.168.8.20. This is kind of important. I'll show you why in a second. And I'm going to name it TrueNAS.hackerlan.party. Let's just copy that. So I'm editing the host file on my node. If you have DNS server, you can do it at the DNS level. That's a much better way of doing it. I'm just going to do it here because we can. Then let's go back to the data center, add NFS, backup, and then the server, I put in the domain, and then I select everything we did before. The reason that having it be a no host name instead of an IP is important is because once this share is created, you can't easily change this within the UI. You probably can by editing files in the file system, but you can't once you've done it. So having a host name is very nice, because then you can just point to a different place instead, and it'll just start working again. So if we look, it has added a new storage already. It actually knows that it has, we've used 100 gigabytes in here, which is kind of interesting because if you look, there's a bunch of previously made VZ dumps. So these are backups from my server before I wiped it for the demo, because I had it doing stuff. It was a used server, and so I want to show you just how stupid simple it is to restore stuff. So I'm just going to click on here, and I'm going to click restore, and I choose where I want to save it. So let's save this one to a warp speed, and then just hit go. I have no idea what we're restoring.
It's your porn box.
Yeah, no, I don't do that. So we'll let it restore, and we can either sit here and watch it. Oh, it's done. That's easy. And then we have a new container. This looks like it was a container. You can tell that it's a container because it calls itself LXC. And then over here you see one that says QEMU. These are virtual machines. And this one's a game server. So now I remember what this is. This is a template server that I created that I build other servers off of. And you can see in here that, I mean, everything comes back. It should be completely usable, and I can start it right up.
Curly wants to know if there's a way to friendly name your backups.
Friendly name your backup. So we don't get to choose names.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all based on the ID of the node.
Yeah, I've never
He's
had
not
a
on
friend
there,
named-
Bash. I'm just.
Okay.
Okay, he's not using his real name if he's on there.
What was I gonna say? So this is back. This is restored. Now let's say that we want to do a backup of this one. There's a couple of different ways that we can do it. We can either, we can see here that. So this is unfortunate, but it's the way that it is. It thinks we already have a backup, right? Which we haven't. It's a brand new box. Why does it think it has a backup? I know why. Go ahead.
Because it has the same ID as that. other
Exactly.
backup.
It has the same ID. So in Proxmox, each VM and container get given a unique ID. We have 101, 102, 100, right? In my backups list that we were looking at, you see we have 100, 101, 102, all the way up to 115.
That's the only thing that's unique in those.
It's the only thing that's unique. So the way it is it's got the VZ dump, which is saying it's a backup. The type of is, which is an LXC or Kemu. I don't know, it's VM. Then you've got the ID that it is, and then you've got the date and time that it was done. So it's just parsing through and saying, oh, they have the same ID, so this should be mine. No, it's not, but whatever. So we'll go ahead and we'll back this one up anyways. We have different modes of backups. Okay, well, let's talk about modes of backups. Snapshot, suspend, and stop. Leave it as default with snapshot. Test it. If it works, perfect. If it doesn't, you may have to switch to stop or suspend. Go ahead.
With the snapshot, if you do subsequent backups, and you're doing the snapshot, does it work like ESXi or others where it will just look for changes and just back those up? And
Yep.
so effectively, if you don't go back and erase backup, some of those snapshots are going to be slowing in your system
Yes.
forever.
So the problem is yes, it depends on your underlying storage, right? Are you doing ZFS? Are you doing whatever, right? And how it stores it. I don't know the exact in and outs of it. I just know that some of them work and some of them don't. And I know that if you're backing up to a remote storage, not the same storage that you're running them on, you're not doing your normal ZFS snapshotting, right? This is more of a, we take a snapshot of the VM in a certain state and then copy it over to another place. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't quite get that. Are we doing differential backups or incremental?
The honest truth is when it's going to remote storage, you are doing full backups every time.
Okay.
Full backups.
Even with snapshots.
Even with snapshot. This is just the mode of what's going to happen to the VM when it goes to backup. Is it going to stop the VM? Is it going to suspend it and then bring it back up? Or is it going to try and snapshot it while it's running without stopping it, right? At a certain point in time. So we'll do snapshot, and we'll just see how it does.
You can't do this with vSphere.
Can't do this with vSphere? Well, that's too bad, because this is one of the best parts of Proxmox.
I've got my servers automatically Sunday morning they back up to NAS.
Yeah, so mine runs every night, too. And we're backed up. We took 234 megabytes. It's already copied to this TrueNAS box, and it's done. Super convenient. Now we have, two backups. One from the 28th, which is when I backed up my server, and one from today. Your dates there. And so we can be like, oh, change protection. I want to lock this so this backup doesn't get deleted. And then let's give it a quick comment of pre
Before a privilege out there.
Right, and then this is during class, so we'll just name it. Right, and just notes for myself that I can remember. This one's so let's talk about pruning of backups, because this is really important. If we come to our backups here, backups have the ability to be pruned, and we can just click. We can click prune, and what this will do is we'll prune a group of backups. Basically, it's saying all the Lxc 100s, let's prune them. But what does that mean? If we come to our...
Is that button instant, or does it give you a dialog to specify the type of prune?
I don't know. See, I do auto prune, and
Okay.
I don't want to prune it. So we can let's take a look at setting up our backup setup. So and we'll talk a little bit more about it. So we can create a scheduled backup task. And what's important is setting up the retention, right? And so if we say we want 3 daily backups and then 3 hourly backups, that means that we will keep 6 backups in total, right? In total, like that's the minimum that we will have. Is we will have it will take a snapshot every single hour, and then once it hits the 4th hour, it will delete the last one, and then it'll just start deleting the last one over and over. It's way awesome, and so that's what's pruning doing. So you can set it to prune, and you can go and read about it in their instructions. And I would go ahead.
Is that 3 total or 3 per VM?
This is per VM. Yeah, and so so I'm gonna do. We're gonna set this every Sunday, and I'm gonna do it to be. I'm gonna include exclude selected is what I'm gonna choose, because I want it to exclude this one, because why not? That's, who cares? But the rest of them will get backed up. You can have it send you an email, make sure that your backups run successfully. I don't know. I would probably start ignoring it after a few weeks. But we can, oh, I didn't even hit create. Oops. Sunday at 1 a.m. Exclude selected. Right, and so what this will do is it will run it. It gives you the time when it's going to run, or I can force it to run right now. So if I force it, it's going to in the background start the backup task and just start doing it. It's probably good the first time you run it and to check to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Now, I am going to tell you that I have seen errors when you first try to do backups of things where it just says there's not enough space. Now, that happens if your local, well, here, we'll pull it up. If on your Navu, well, on your node, your root file system, so I have a terabyte, but if you only have like a 32 gig or 120 gig drive, and your VM has much more space than that, it's going to fail because it's using a spot on this on your root. I don't remember what the default spot is.
Like a paging file. As
a temporary location. So you need to fix that. And I'll show you how to fix that real quick. Oh, if I remember. Let's hope I remember.
Do we get the heater on?
I have the furnace running, or the fan just to circulate the air.
Oh, okay. Felt like it was cool air at first, and then it was like it's like getting warmer now.
You know what? I don't remember where it is. I will show you after class. But there's a well, here, let's pull it up. This is actually really important. Proxmox TMP DIR. Yeah, that's where it is. It is in Etsy VZ.k. So what you need to do is you need to uncomment this temp dir and then give it a directory that has enough space to do it. Because what it's doing is it's building a tar.gz file into that spot, and then it's then copying it from there to your NFS storage. So
you want to put a mask there?
So what I would do, because I would suggest making your primary drive really small, and then adding those second drives is really big. I would just make your temp drive one of those second drives that has a lot of space. Just know if you fill it up too much, at some point you don't have enough space to have a temp swap location, your backups will start failing. So
does it clearly swap space once it's done?
It does. It will remove the file once it's done. It's just and it removes it per VM. It's not like the whole job needs to be done. It's just your largest VM is the least is the amount of space that you need. VM or container. I actually believe this is an issue primarily for containers backups and not VMs. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that people are really excited about is Docker in Proxmox. So there's two ways to do Docker. There is a guide written by, I think his name is Wendell from L2 something, level 1 text, that's what it is, that he wrote a guide on how to actually install Docker to the Debian host. I think that's a bad idea, and I would highly suggest not doing it, primarily because it breaks a lot of stuff. But the reason you want to use Docker is because you don't have the full fat VM and you're not using all that memory and stuff. I suggest running Docker inside an Lxc container. It's kind of weird. Okay, it's really weird because you have a container inside of a container, but who cares? Exactly.
There's another thing called Docker, so
It's
it's not all that new.
Yes.
You like containers.
I heard you like containers.
It's when you want to build containers within a container.
So here's the game server that I installed, right? So in here, ooh, I don't have Docker. Dang it! I was hoping this one had Docker. Okay, let's just install. Do you guys want to learn how to install Docker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it. Why not? Okay. Docker install.
This is all getting recorded, right?
Yes, it's all getting recorded, and I'm also on Discord, so I can answer these questions too.
No, actually, wait, I'm supposed to be looking at that.
Okay, so.
It's probably filled with goats.
Oh.
Yep, no, they're making jokes.
I broke my networking.
IRC habits die hard.
Okay, Admiral has made it clear this needs to be said out loud. So we can prune the backups, but can we pickle them?
So that's a stupid question. But let's think about it. What does pickling mean?
Preserving it.
Preserving it, right? You put it in a little, like a jar, and you put it somewhere safe for a really long time. So I guess we could take our TrueNAS box and upload our VMs to a cloud storage and leave them there for a long time, and we'll call that pickling.
Glacier. Ask area move it to Glacier after 90 days, and then it will stay there for
Yes.
eternity.
Okay, did you guys see this error? This is super annoying. This, I don't know if you can read it. I'm sorry, it's so small. But our set limit, it drives me off the wall. You can fix this error, believe it or not, with containers. So, I don't know why they don't fix it themselves. But what you need to do is you need to do this. Inside your container, just do that. The other thing, yeah, there's another workaround and there's a few other ways. I found this to be the easiest. Let's see if we can find the other one.
So it's throwing that error when you're trying to install Docker?
Every time you run sudo.
Oh, every time you run
Every
sudo.
single time you run
Oh,
sudo.
I've never had that. Oh, this doesn't know that.
Yeah, we're not going to fix it the other way. We're just going to deal with it. You can fix it inside your container and call it good. I'm just running a quick thing to sudo. It means nothing. It's just annoying. That's all it is.
Okay, this is a legitimate one. Stop typing sudo, you're rude.
So,
That's true. I am rude. Why am I typing sudo?
yeah, so it's like a non-starter.
It's because I'm copy pasting.
It's okay, I do the same thing because I'm used to typing sudo.
Okay.
You got another R11X.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, spaces.
Yes. But
Are you just
Okay.
putting all the commands in?
Yeah, so I'm just following the
I use that. So when I try to control shift,
the guide here.
close the tab. So I ended up
Okay. So I just followed this guide real quick, command for command. If you go to install this yourself, just watch the recording. Or just go and read their guide. It's very simple. But now we should have Docker real fast. So does anyone have a favorite Docker container?
An Arc server container.
Ooh, Arc is Windows only. It doesn't run.
Some kind of Discord bot.
Well, let's do Plex. Everybody loves Plex. Plex is a big deal, right?
Sure.
So let's do Plex. So I told you that I really like these Linux
Apple
servers.
MK Ultra wants Alpine.
Not doing it. You can. An Alpine, you can. But I want something that actually runs an app.
Yeah.
Like Alpine is something that containers are built on. So
Yeah, like Linux server.
Alpine latest is just probably the smallest container.
yeah. So I'm gonna do Plex from Linux Server, because Plex is amazing, and it's why not? And everybody wants to run Plex. So
Distro lists? I don't. It's a request. Does that mean anything to anyone?
Go with Plex.
There we go, Kate. So I'm gonna just show you real quick. So this is the Docker run. You can do Docker Compose if you like to. But the important part I wanted to highlight was this restart unless stopped. That's really important to have on your Docker commands. I'll show you why later. But just do that. And they want paths to libraries. We're not gonna do that. They're just gonna have an issue and not exist. So they get straight root. And we're not gonna, yeah. So we'll do that.
Use Docker Compose restart.
Yes. Well, we don't want restart always. You want restart unless stopped. Because if you want to stop a container, you want it to stop.
And not come back.
And not come back when you reboot the machine. Right?
Well, I usually want it to come.
You usually want it to come back. But that's why unless stopped. Unless you do the Docker stop and then the container name, it will always come back.
I guess I just remember to Docker rn after I stop if I don't want it to come back.
Well, sometimes I want a container to stop for a couple of days, and then I'll bring it up myself, you know. And then if the box reboots for some reason, I want it to come back up, you know. Anyway, so we're almost done.
I also don't do online stuff as much. I do more prod stuff.
Yeah, you do prod stuff. Okay, so in here, we are inside an Lxc container. It feels like a VM. And then we do Docker PS, and we're like, oh, our Docker container is up and running. We probably want to access it. So I'm going to do IPA, like you would on a normal Linux box. And we can grab the IP address. And we can just... So you can see here that here's our Plex server. Doesn't look like a Plex server, but whatever. Logs.
You need a slash on the end.
Oh, I need a slash at the end? I don't think that'll change anything.
Yeah, that would still root.
Slash web.
Oh, slash web on the end.
There we
That
go.
would make more sense.
There we go.
We were missing something.
Okay, so there we have Docker running inside of Lxc. It's really funky, and it works super well. We have all the benefits of a container where we're not having to run it inside of a fat VM. So you can run a bunch of VMs in here. You can set up Portainer in here. Portainers are a whole other topic of awesomeness. The only thing you can't really do very well is there's some fancy Docker networking. That doesn't work as well inside of containers. And yeah, so it's unfortunate, but it is the way that it is. And you can do a lot of that networking inside of Proxmox. In fact, you can emulate anything you want to do in Docker networking just fine. It's just like once you start getting too complex, this container does not have privileged access to the host to make a lot of those networking changes. Now, if you are comfortable making them and you want to, you can come in here and you can edit the options, and you can change it. Well, we'll shut it down. It needs to be shut down. You can change it from an unprivileged container to a privileged container, and then it can make a lot of those changes.
Because then, well, sorry, this is Rabbit Hole, so I'll ask you later.
Okay, so you can make all of them. I do not, because I don't want to use, I don't want to do any of those stuff. I want to use Proxmox. So personally, the way that I do it, gonna laugh, is I create a unique container here for each unique service that I'm doing. And the reason why is then I can just right-click and start. Well, I should name this Plex now instead of Game Server, and then I'm starting Plex. And because I set it to restart unless stopped, now that the container is booting up, the Docker container will boot almost instantly after the container's finished. And it's seconds to boot the containers because you're not booting a whole VM. And you can do it all in here. But you can, if you want to, go to something like Portainer and do it all in a single container and have a second UI for your containers and another UI for your VMs. I just like having a unified interface. One of the things that people find a lot that they want is they want a VM-only network, right? I hear that a lot. The way that you'll do that is you will create a bridge that has no bridge ports, right? And so I would name this one VM only. And then I'm just going to apply that. And then when I create a VM only network, I can come in here and add my VM only network. I still don't know why the VLAN one isn't showing up. That's really annoying to me. Yeah. It's really just driving me off the wall.
Apparently, MK Ultra wants you to put microkernel in a VM.
That sounds like they're trolling. Okay, so that's kind of it. Do you guys have questions? I've kind of hit everything on my list. We've done backups. We've scheduled backups. We've showed you how to do a restore. We did network storage. We can get deep into the woods and do ISCSI with TrueNAS and do block storage for VMs. Like you can create, like if we want to, you can create your well, let's do it real quick. You can create your VM storage on an external device. So like we did that NFS share, right? Let's see. So come to storage, and we called it TrueNAS backups. We can actually do disk images too and containers. So if we enable everything on there, we can create a VM or a container. Let's do ISOs, right? And in the disk, instead of choosing large body, we can actually choose that NFS share. And so that would be the network storage instead of it. So that would be the VM running its storage off of this. Now, right now, it's a very bad idea because I've only got gig speed and we're using a USB to SATA thing. But if you have a fast storage and you have 10 gig networking, that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, that's actually what I do at home, is I do that. So we covered that. Any other questions? Go ahead. Yeah.
So a use case I'd like to look at is creating essentially an entire network inside of this. So I have a DMZ with a pfSense at either side, and then stuff behind it. Aside from just straight up escape, is there a problem with that?
So no. So the question is, you're trying to create let's say you're trying to create a malware environment, right? What I would do is I would create a bridge here and call it malware. Right? I create a malware network. Let's just apply that so it doesn't bug us. And then I would create, well, I've done it before. let's see if we can find it. If I go to the backups. Let's restore. I'm gonna gamble. Let's restore this one. So what I would do, the way I would orchestrate it, is I would create a VM, right? And that VM will be your router, okay? And then I would set your router, your pfSense box up very, very carefully, and set it up so that any internet traffic doesn't hit your home network. It gets piped out through a VPN, and that's fun. Yeah, well, that VM didn't restore. RIP. And this probably, yeah, this was my pfSense box. Sorry, OpenSense. So you create a VM, and then you attach two networks to that VM. One would be straight off to your internet, and you'd bridge it off to your normal network, and then the other one would be this internal VMs only network, or the malware network that we created. And you just very carefully set your pfSense box, your OpenSense box, to make sure that there's no outgoing traffic that hits your house, and it's all tunneled through a VPN, and then you can do all your stuff inside your malware network, and you should be fine.
And so that's the first door to the firewall, and then that's, I mean, not the firewall, the DMZ, and then the second door, is that another pfSense box, and then I have the malware behind that?
If you want to.
Or, okay.
If you want to. I have a really good PDF from a guy who set up an entire malware analysis environment, and I will share that with you because he made it free. And that goes over how to set up a really good one, and you can translate what he's done for, I think he did it for VMware on your laptop, to something like Proxmox.
Yeah, my biggest focus right now is being able to just run pfSense not on a separate box, because it's a huge waste of time.
Yeah, you know, I run this in here all the time. In fact, what I did for my family is we set up a, you're gonna laugh, but we set up a 0-tier network for playing video games, right? And then I created a OpenSense box. It was just a VM inside of Proxmox. And then inside of that OpenSense box, I had a VM-only network with all the game servers. And what happened is I made it so that you could plug into one of these ports here, and that would drop you onto that VM's only network, and so that you could physically connect to all the game servers running in here, or you could connect to the 0-tier, and then through OpenSense it would drop you into the network as well. And so there's lots of cool things that you can do and set up that do something similar where you're running OpenSense or pfSense.
Self-hosted 0-tier.
Ish. I'm not running their relay stuff. That's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's all free.
Mm-hmm. No, 0-tier is amazing.
Yeah.
That's how you play Diablo these days.
Well, it's one of the ways. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, are there any on Discord?
I don't think so. I think. Sorry, I'll check this.
MK Ultra. So apparently, it sounds like microkernel VMs are to a Docker what a VM is to a Docker.
Well, I don't know anything about that, so I can't answer any questions about microkernel VMs.
They're Unix kernels, they just use the micro symbol because people don't understand Greek.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Well, we can sit and talk about stuff. I'm sure there are people who have their own environments with things they want to do. I'd love to help out. And thank you so much.
Give us money!
Going to stop this?
Yeah.